President Donald Trump is showing no signs of slowing down, revoking security protection for his former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and former top aide Brian Hook.
Sources told the New York Times that both Pompeo and Hook face threats from Iran. They were part of the team under President Trump 1.0 that ordered a drone strike that killed Qasem Soleimani, a powerful Iranian general.
Here's what Trump had to say Thursday about the move.
Sir, why did you revoke security protections for former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Brian Hook?
Well, the same reason I do. When you have protection, you can't have it for the rest of your life. Do you want to have a large detail of people guarding people for the rest of their lives? I mean, there's risks to everything.
Fox News contributor and town hall editor Guy Benson wrote on X, Iran is trying to kill Pompeo in retaliation for the good and correct killing of Soleimani, as rightly ordered to Trump. As long as the threat is active, he and other officials should be protected.
On the other end, journalist Glenn Greenwald wrote, John Bolton and Mike Pompeo are two of the most deranged and bloodthirsty warmongers this side of Liz Cheney, and I'm finding it genuinely entertaining watching people upset that Trump decided they don't deserve lifelong, government-paid, around-the-clock security details.
Trump's National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, sent about 160 National Security Council aides home this week.
Waltz's chief of staff told the aides to be on call. They will only return if their supervisors ask them to.
NSC spokesman Brian Hughes said the move was to ensure personnel are committed to implementing Trump's America First agenda. Well, where do you want to start with this, Amber? The revocation of the detail for Pompeo and
Let's do
the
it.
NSC stuff. Okay, so I have no great sympathy for Mike Pompeo, and I don't really disagree with Glenn Greenwald's assessment of the overall policy. Where I have some sympathy is the idea, it's pretty unusual for me to agree with Guy Benson too, I might add, but Benson's argument is one that I do actually have quite a lot of sympathy with, which is if someone in a fairly senior level of government is involved in an action that is part of their official duties that the President of the United States at the time has supported or decided to go for, and that action results in a credible threat being made against them, it seems to me that there kind of is a moral obligation on the government of the United States to protect them from a threat that has been incurred in the performance of their duties.
That part is the only element of the argument that I'm sympathetic to, is that this threat exists because of his things that he carried out during his course of duty in serving the country. But I think that similar threat exists for plenty of other former government officials who don't have access to secret security protection for their entire life or until that threat is gone. I mean, even if you just think of members of our military, right? They don't get taxpayer-funded Secret Service protection, and yet they're probably on all kinds of hit lists from various countries that they've served in.
I wonder, is that true? I mean, it is certainly true that countries that they've served in would have a grievance against the US military. But I would actually like to know how common it is for individual, as it were, rank and file members of the military to be under specific death threats. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth asking. But I also find it interesting that it is a lot of Democrats who are taking issue with this, because there was indeed a refusal from the Biden administration in particular to grant RFK Jr. Secret Service protection when he was running for president. And then you also had, I believe it was Benny Thompson, who actually filed a piece of legislation that would have limited the amount of Secret Service that Trump was able to have access to on the campaign trail. And this is a guy who ended up facing 2 assassination attempts. So it seems like there's a little bit of a double standard here from some Democrats who would like to criticize one example of pulling security, but not their own.
It is a curious thing, the whole issue of Secret Service protection, because we all carry our sort of personal experiences into our perceptions of things. And having grown up in a place where there was in fact a political conflict, I am frequently surprised at the comparative lack of Secret Service protection that I see for very well-known people just as I walk around Washington. Now, there is obviously a related issue about the Secret Service, less in terms of funding per se, but in terms of resources, in terms of the people who have gone through the amount of training required to provide protection to politicians or other people in the public eye who are under real threat. I mean, clearly in the case of Trump, that those were legitimate and serious, and in one case very close to a successful assassination attempt against him. And obviously there were very serious questions, to say the very least, about the Butler attempt and how the guy got on the rooftop, and it seemed just even to people who are not experts in security inexplicable how that happened. Obviously, I don't think that decisions about who gets protection should be made on whether we like their politics or not. If they are public officials within the small d democratic process and they're in danger, I think they should be protected. I understand that resources are finite, but there we are.
One of the other points that Glenn Greenwald brought up was that Mike Pompeo and some of these other individuals who have had their security taken away got extraordinarily wealthy from their positions serving the U.S. government. So perhaps there's a calculation that should be made as well as to whether or not someone can afford private security. And if you're someone who has not, traded your security clearance for getting major media gigs or doing speeches or working in the military-industrial complex, maybe then you do deserve some taxpayer help on that front.
Yeah, and we've addressed actually that point or a related point a couple of times this week on Rising, which is this idea that people get lifelong security clearances. So even when you're retired from government service, you hang on to your security clearance. That seems just on its face pretty shady to me.
Agreed.
And pretty unnecessary. And I assume that people leverage it all the time for private employment opportunities, shall we say, which are often quite lucrative, and that doesn't seem quite right.
Did you want to take us to the other topic we were supposed to cover? I don't have my full script here, so I'll leave it to you.
Yes, now you've... Oh, people have been told to go home.
That's right. National Security Council. That's right.
National Security Council have been told to go home because they're not America first enough. There is obviously skepticism in Trump world that the first time around they were undercut by people who were much more part of the Republican establishment. Beyond political views, I think that a president has the right more or less to choose who he or she, when we get to that stage, wishes.
Yeah, I think that's right. Look, if you're someone who is, let's say, a career as opposed to a political appointee in an administration, you still have an obligation to carry out the duties that you're given by the executive as a member of that branch, and that should be the only consideration that's taken into account when determining whether or not one of those people gets to stay in and continue to work for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is not very democratic to have someone elected to the presidency who is trying to enact their policies and then experiencing resistance from within. That seems to be empowering people who are not elected to do too much.
With therefore no accountability through the electoral process. All right, great show today. That's going to do it for us today on Rising. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. See you next time.